Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 102 based on novel. So let's start. Visit Ghost Valley. Ling Yuxiu hesitated and said, the great-grandma of Sai family said that Ghost Valley is very treacherous, and even the experts of Heavenly Saint cult, as well as the great shamans and shaman kings of Roland's Golden Palace, had encountered disastrous casualties when they explored that place. So what can we do there by ourselves? Qin Mu didn't change his intentions. That place might be related to my birth, so no matter what, I have to visit it. This is my personal matter and is unrelated to the sacred cult, as it is unrelated to the two of you. I'll be fine going there by myself. He walked out of the factory and called the dragon Chilin over. The dragon Chilin, who had been sleeping outside, immediately stood up when he heard Qin Mu. He pulled himself together and asked, "Is it the next day already? Is it time to eat?" Qin Mu leaped onto his back and said unpleasantly, "It's not the next day. What can you do other than sleep and eat? Let's go to Chingmen Pass." The dragon Chilin yawned and fire clouds grew under his feet as he began sprinting to the north. "Cult Master, you have gotten fatter again, you're 200 pounds heavier than before." Qin Mu was furious and scolded, "Bullshit. Just to refine those swords, I slimmed down these days. Besides, the swords in my sack are at most 100 pounds or so. You are the one who has clearly gotten fatter." Ling Yuxiu and Sai Yinxiang ran out to see the dragon Chilin already in mid-air, and over 10 miles into the distance. Sai Yinxiang frowned. "Even if you really want to go, you should prepare for it. The one that herds cows is too reckless, he's underestimating the dangers of Ghost Valley." Sai Yinxiang rubbed her buttocks again. Qin Mu's slap had been hard, and she still felt her buttocks searing with pain. How would there be a lack of experts in Heavenly Saint cult? Ever since we were kidnapped by Long Jianan, Heavenly King Yu and Heavenly King Shi no longer felt at ease, so they are definitely nearby. Don't worry, if he meets any danger, they won't sit by and do nothing. What a pity. She fell into a daze and suddenly said, if the sacred cult master died in Ghost Valley, the saintess would naturally succeed him. What a pity, I didn't go along with the cult master, otherwise the sacred cult master would have certainly died in Ghost Valley. Ling Yuxiu became alert and sneered, "Little vixen, if you dare to touch the one that herds cows, I'll break your legs." Sai Yinxiang chuckled. "Little hussy, I've long seen you as a thorn in my side. You've become a hindrance to me by sticking around the cult master with those big breasts of yours, taking away my chance to strike when I wanted to." The two girls stared each other in the eyes and found the other really annoying. The two of them then turned away, standing with their backs facing each other. Sai Yinxiang's gaze flickered, and 1,000 silks quietly spread out and tunneled into the ground like fine spirit snakes, sneaking towards the direction of Ling Yuxiu. At this moment, 9 dragons behind Ling Yuxiu's back also quietly stretched their bodies, and the dragon's scales shifted their positions silently. Sharp blades popped out from the dragon claws, and the dragon-shaped spirit weapons secretly flew towards Sai Yinxiang. "I've long found you annoying." The two girls burst forth at the same time and ruthlessly executed their moves. Ling Yuxiu's dress was split apart by 1,000 silks, as she narrowly avoided becoming minced meat. In the meantime, Sai Yinxiang's body fluttered around like a butterfly, avoiding the combined attacks of the 9 dragons. Ling Yuxiu's body flipped continuously, until she slammed her palm on the ground. Terrifying magic power burst forth, and the ground trembled violently as stone pillars broke through the earth, forcing Sai Yinxiang to fly into the air. Ling Yuxiu soared into the air with a few steps and stretched her hand to grab 9 dragons' weapons. Instantly, lightning and flames gathered on the 9 dragons' hammer, and she smashed down with it. I said I'll break your legs, and I'll definitely not eat my words. Cai Yunxiang chuckled, and 1,000 silks came stabbing at Ling Yuxiu's back. The silver sword threads suddenly expanded and slashed towards Ling Yuxiu's head like incomparably fine snakes. How are your abilities compared to those of Fozi? Going to break my legs? I'll chop off your head first. Numerous disciples of heavenly crafts Hall walked out of the factory and raised their heads to take a look. They could saw two women fighting fiercely in the sky, then Cai Yunxiang being smashed down, giving all the disciples of heavenly crafts Hall a shock. They did not know if they should go and help. They then saw Cai Yunxiang becoming invisible and appearing behind Princess Yuxiu, causing her to vomit blood. This is not something we can bother with, an incense master said. With regards to matters of jealousy, no matter which side we help, we won't be able to justify ourselves to the cult master. So let's just treat it as we didn't see anything. Everyone nodded and left. The Dragon Chilean's leg speed wasn't slow, and he reached Chingmen Pass by evening. However, the atmosphere there was oppressive. Commander-in-Chief Bian Jinyun of Qingmen Pass was old friends with Qin Mu and immediately came to welcome him. How did Divine Physician have the time to come here? I plan to visit Ghost Valley, Qin Mu explained. It's getting dark now, so I can't enter Great Ruins, so I want to rest at Qingmen Pass for a night. General, what's the situation here now? Bian Jinyun shook his head with a grave expression. The situation is grim. These few months, Barbarian DI Empire has been increasing the number of their troops, and more strong practitioners have been appearing in Roland's Golden Palace. I've heard that the envoys of Barbarian DI Empire have secretly gone back to the prairie. So it looks like Barbarian DI Empire is planning to send their army against eternal peace, when we are weak. In the last few days, I've seen some people on the other side of the border that looked like they'd come from Wolfstore country. Recently, the mounted scouts of the Barbarian tribe have even frequently come out to run about the area between our two borders with arrogant aura. I'm afraid. He had a worried expression. I've already sent people to report to the Emperor as fast as possible. If the Barbarian tribe attacks, the military power of Chingmen Pass alone won't be enough to defend. Divine Physician Qin, by right, I should be sending experts to escort you to Ghost Valley, but I really can't mobilize anybody. Qin Mu smiled. General should attach the most importance to the general situation, there's no need to worry about me. I'm just going to Ghost Valley and not the prairie, so I won't have any conflict with the Barbarian tribe. The sky was already dark, the darkness having invaded the land. Qin Mu looked into the distance, and saw the brilliant rays shining into the sky from the enemy encampment 100 miles away, penetrating through the darkness like daylight. When it came to the morning, Qin Mu woke up and washed up, before eating breakfast and feeding the Dragon Chilean. Bian Jinyun sent him out of the pass while saying, Divine Physician, I won't be able to send you off any farther, otherwise, the enemy will take this chance to mobilize its troops. I can only have my mounted scouts follow you from afar as an escort. Be careful on your journey. Qin Mu gave his thanks and sat down on the Dragon Chilean's back, sprinting towards Duck Tongue Zone that was between the two empires. Behind him, the mounted scouts of Chingmen Pass followed from afar, while riding on all kinds of strange beasts, and came to Duck Tongue Zone that was in the center of the two lands. The opposite side also had sent out a few more men and horses that were dressed queerly. They rode on the strange beasts that looked like camels with wings. They were most likely the mounted scouts of Barbarian DI Empire. The two sides discovered each other and made their moves at almost the same time. Sword and knife pellets filled the sky and clanged as they collided. The mounted scouts of Chingmen Pass suddenly opened up a few bottle gourds, and clouds instantly poured out, covering a radius of over 10 miles. A person's gaze then could only see a distance of 30 yards or so. Both sides instantly lost track of each other, and a rare silence fell on the battleground. Qin Mu opened Green Heaven's eyes, and his gaze penetrated through the fog to help him determine his path. The dragon Chilin went towards the back of Duck Tongue's zone under the cover of the fog. The Emperor had indeed listened to my suggestion, and kept the clouds and lightning to be used as a weapon. Even with so many soldiers stationed in Barbarian Di Empire, it will probably be quite difficult for them to break through Chingmen Pass. Duck Tongue Zone was very long and stretched for 1,000 miles, all the way to Great Ruins. When it came to night time, this was a barrier that separated the two empires. When entering Great Ruins, the greatest danger was the darkness. Qin Mu was an abandoned person that was born in Great Ruins and naturally knew the things he had to look out for. Thus he surveyed the passing scenery for things like ruins and stone statues. If he couldn't return back to Chingmen Pass before it turned dark, he would have to spend the night in Great Ruins. So he had to find a place to settle down. Duck Tongue Zone was very quiet. Not even a bird could be seen along the way. Qin Mu had a grave expression. If not even a bird could be seen, it meant that there was no safe place here. Not even the strange beasts of Great Ruins could live here when it came to night time. He went past a lake which was azure like a sapphire. The surface of the lake was incomparably serene, and had no ripple at all. This was a dead lake and there were no fish or prawn inside. There's also no place to avoid the darkness in the lake. Qin Mu composed himself and continued forward. Without him noticing, the dragon Chilin walked out of Duck Tongue Zone and the mountains in the surroundings gradually became precipitous. A ravine appeared in front of them. Qin Mu sat on the back of the dragon Chilin and saw that the trees in the ravine were growing vertically and horizontally. Some of them were growing on the cliffs, seemingly escaping from the Earth's magnetic force. The trees that grew horizontally covered the sky above the ravine. It seemed like he'd entered a world flipped upside down, where the cliff was the ground. The thick trees were extremely ancient, and some couldn't even be hugged by dozens of people. The roots of these trees intertwined like dragons, and phosphorescence of will-o'-the-wisps could be seen under the roots. There were bones of huge beasts there, but Qin Mu couldn't recognize who they belonged to before. What was peculiar was the corpses and bones were on the cliff and not at the bottom of the ravine. The falling leaves were also not floating down to the bottom of the ravine, but landed on the cliff. This ravine was strangely clean, without any fallen leaves or branches in sight. Thump! The dragon Chilin accidentally bumped into a huge rock floating in the air, and that rock spun to one side, but still remained floating in the air. In the ravine in front, rocks of all sizes floated. Cult Master, we should be entering Ghost Valley, right? The dragon Chilin asked in a low voice. Qin Mu nodded. We should. There are no other life forms here, which makes me uneasy. Just as he said this, he heard a voice coming from in front of them. You always like to eat them raw, but I like them medium done, having been roasted on the fire as oil dripped down, ending up tender inside. There have been some people coming over these few days and they've all tasted great, yet you want to eat them raw. Aren't you too dirty? Medium well is not nice, there's no fresh and tender feeling. It's best to roast them on the fire for a moment until their hairs are burned off. It's the most delicious when they squeal as you eat them. Bullshit, medium is the tastiest. Shush, silence, someone is here. Qin Mu executed Mars Fire Marquis' true technique, and transformed into the form of Mars Sovereign. The dragon Chilin carried him forward, coming to the place from which the voice had come. Qin Mu looked around and was slightly stunned. The voices had come from here, but he couldn't see anyone that could have been talking. There was only a large fire pit on the cliff with a great shaman from Roland's Golden Palace being roasted. That great shaman had a profound cultivation and was not yet dead. However, His strength had been exhausted by being roasted, and he opened his eyes weakly to take a look at Qin Mu and the dragon Qin. Whoosh! The trees suddenly moved, and two huge, white-furred bats hung down from one tree. With their heads below and feet above, they looked at Qin Mu from right in front of him. The two white-furred bats were extremely strong, with muscles all over their bodies. Their arms were crossed in front of their chests, while their eyes revealed white lights that seemed like white flames flowing in their eyes. Qin Mu's heart leaped slightly. These two huge bats were variants and very terrifying ones at that. They had no more demon air around their bodies. Having replaced it was an aura that was like that of gods or devils. They had to be the descendants of gods or devils. They are not humans. One of the huge bats pulled itself back into the crown of the tree. Killjoys. I thought there were more humans. The other huge bat also pulled its body back, and Qin Mu hurriedly asked, "Two Dao friends, how do you do?" The leaves rustled, and the two huge bats hung down again. They still had their arms crossed in front of their chests, and said in unison, "How do you do? However, this is not for you, we caught him ourselves. If you have the ability, go and catch your own humans, there's still some in the valley." Qin Mu immediately smiled. This little brother has been a vegetarian since birth. The two huge bats were immediately put at ease, and Qin Mu said, "This little brother is from outside. The two Dao friends, is the valley safe to stay at night?" One of the bats smiled and said, "No wonder you look unfamiliar. The valley is very safe." Qin Mu sighed in relief and thanked the two bats. They shrunk their bodies and appeared beside the bonfire once more, waiting for the great shaman to be cooked. Just now that cow seemed to have the bloodline of Mars, but a pity he wouldn't be delicious. "Humans are the best, tasty and juicy," one of the bats said while staring at the fire. The other bat snickered and said, "So why are you harming him? You clearly know how treacherous the valley is." From what the two white bats said, there seems to be quite a number of great shamans coming from Roland's Golden Palace. I will have to guard against them. Qin Mu's expression was grave as he opened up a small opening in the Daotai sack on his back, so he could draw his sword out if anything bad happened. "Cult Master, those two fellows just now were very strong." The dragon Qin walked forward and avoided the huge rocks floating in the sky while saying, "Those two fellows are not weaker than me and they are extremely ancient." Qin Mu looked around and said in a low voice, "They should be offsprings of some god, descendants of gods or devils. You're bragging by saying they are not weaker than you. 10 of you couldn't beat either of the two bats. Their aura is too strong." The dragon Qin was rather unconvinced and said resentfully, "That's because I'm still young. Once I reach adulthood, 10 of them won't be able to beat one of me. I'm very useful." Qin Mu ignored the dragon Qin, that had become as fat as a ball and yet still wanted to brag. He pondered and said, "Strange, why are there still such creatures like white bats in great ruins? Could they have been left behind by the bat gods from before the catastrophe? Had the descendants of gods and devils survived the disaster? There were temples in great ruins worshipping divine statues of bat gods, as they were gods of prosperity, blessing the people. He had once seen a stone statue of a bat god in Border Dragon City. That statue had had a bat head and a human body, with flesh wings and a membrane growing under the arms. The appearance of that bat god was slightly similar to these two white bats, but these two looked more primitive. If not for the head and wings of the bat god looked like a human. If those two white bats were the descendants of the bat god before the catastrophe, could there be other descendants of gods and devils in other places of great ruins? However, Qin Mu had never seen any of them in great ruins. He thought of something then and asked, "Fatty Dragon, where were you living at before you met Patriarch?" "Great ruins." The dragon Qin recalled the past and was filled with reminiscence as he said, "Not long after I was born, my mother disappeared. I was giddy-headed from all the starving and was almost dead when I met Patriarch. I saw that he was quite handsome and was swindled by a spirit pill. It was a single slip-up that caused everlasting sorrow. Qin Mu was between laughter and tears. Clearly Patriarch saw you there so pitiful from hunger that he gave you a spirit pill, which made you cling to him, shamelessly sticking around and making him unable to shake you off. But come to think of it, fatty dragon, you're also considered an offspring of a god, right? Could the offspring of gods before the catastrophe have become the strange beasts of great ruins today? He had a weird expression. Great ruins had to have been an incomparably prosperous era, in which gods and humans lived together. Because of that, their descendants also lived here. Then, the great disaster struck, and the gods went extinct while their descendants slowly transformed into the current strange beasts. This guess was truly shocking, but it wasn't impossible. In the ravine in front, the two sides of the cliffs were covered in dense vegetation. Forests growing on the cliffs gave people an extremely preposterous feeling, while the rocks floating in the air clearly showed the distortion of the magnetic force here. Suddenly, Qin Mu felt movement from his Daotai sack, and his heart stirred slightly. He opened his Daotai sack, and saw Carefree Sword gently trembling, giving off a crisp and clear sword cry. Qin Mu's vital qi went in and brought out the sword. He had planned to use Carefree Sword as the mother sword, refining it into sword pellet, so he had not made a sheath for it. However, it wasn't convenient to hold Carefree Sword in his hand all the time, so he stretched out his hand and Carefree Sword flew up to chop off a branch of an ancient tree. What a durable wood! Qin Mu cut off a branch and tried to use his vital qi thread to slice the wood, but he couldn't do so, which made him exclaim in astonishment. The quality of this wood could be compared to black iron. He executed Carefree Sword to shave the branch, and soon made a wooden sheath, in which he inserted the sword. The blade was still trembling, but it was no longer as eye-catching. Seems like it wasn't only the broken sword and divine metal that dropped from outer space 16 years ago. There is still another item, which is resonating with Carefree Sword. Qin Mu thought to himself. The people of Roland's Golden Palace had already entered Ghost Valley, so would they find that item a step ahead of him? They too came to the end of the ravine, and the area in front of them suddenly widened. Qin Mu walked in there without a hurry, and looked around himself in alertness. At the two ends of the ravine were two huge stone statues that were carved along the mountain ranges. These two statues were as high as the mountains. The two sculptures had solemn expressions and looked dignified and divine. Their gazes were deep and each of them stood upright, with their swords propped. The bubbling of water came from afar, and it the sound of streams flowing down the sculptures' shoulders. The power of those waterfalls was immense as they surged 3,000 yards down, landing onto the hands of the sculptures, before flowing down the swords and gathering below to form a river. Two rivers flowed down from the legs of the sculptures, and formed the image of two dragons in the forest before vanishing into the center of the valley. The two sculptures had bat heads and human bodies. They were no one else but the bat gods. Two bat gods guarding Ghost Valley. What's the relationship between these god statues of two bat gods and those two white bats earlier? Qin Mu looked into the distance, stunned. Could these two rivers flow into the ground? Cyan Heaven's eyes awaken. Another heaven instantly appeared in Qin Mu's pupils, and he looked at the place in which the two rivers vanished. He couldn't help frowning when his vision seemed to be blocked by something. He couldn't see clearly what was there in the distance. Cinnabar Heaven's eyes awaken. Qin Mu gathered his vital qi and formed the rune formation of Cinnabar Heaven's eyes, making a circular vermilion red marking in his pupils. Another layer in, it was a cyan green color of Cyan Heaven's eyes, and another layer in was the green of Green Heaven's eyes. One more layer in was the Heaven's eyes that were formed by white light, while the middle contained the pupil. Blind had imparted 9 Heaven's eyes awakening skills to him, and he had already learned them. However, with his cultivation, he could only awaken Cinnabar Heaven's eyes at most, and the consumption during their use was very huge. He would not use this skill on a normal day. In an ordinary situation, Green Heaven's eyes were enough, so there was no need to awaken Cyan Heaven's eyes and Cinnabar Heaven's eyes. However, even if it was Cinnabar Heaven's eyes, he still couldn't see what was at the place where the two rivers vanished. Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly when he saw a few corpses in front of the forest. They belonged to Roland's Golden Palace's great shamans. The corpses were not far from each other, but the strange thing was that some of them were vivid and lifelike as though they had just died while the others had rotted until only bones were left, yet their clothes were perfectly fine. As Qin Mu's gaze went deeper into the forest, he saw another few corpses. It was obvious that those people had encountered misfortune and died unnaturally. With Cinnabar Heaven's eyes, he suddenly saw something moving beside one corpse before vanishing in a split second. His Heaven's eyes suffered a violent impact, and layers of them rapidly closed one after another. Qin Mu was left dizzy by the impact. He felt as if there were countless miserable screeches in his brain, nearly tearing his soul apart. Luckily for him, he had already succeeded in cultivating primordial spirit, and could endure this attack head-on. However, he didn't manage to see what had attacked him. Amida, Mohar Amida. The miserable screeches in Qin Mu's brain became louder and louder, so he immediately executed Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. The Buddha rays around his body shone brilliantly as the gods and Buddhas of the six heavens appeared behind his head to chant loudly in unison. As the Buddha voice lingered around him, it instantly purified the peculiar screeches that were attacking his soul. The soil under his feet sizzled as green smoke rose, with a stink from the soil. Qin Mu stretched his hands out. As he hugged the void in front of him, a rumble sounded out, as his vital qi transformed into an emerald green body tree descending from the sky, crashing onto the land in front of him. Thousands of branches and roots slammed into the ground with the trunk and the roots flailing as they tunneled into the soil. Miserable shrieks came from underground, and the ground in front of Qin Mu started to roll, as though there was something escaping there. When it passed by the huge tree, it rustled loudly from being shaken by something below it. Even my body Sohar divine art can't kill this creature. Qin Mu gave a low shout and suddenly his body became like jade, sparkling and translucent. A body tree faintly appeared behind his back, and he looked like a bull-headed Buddha, which was achieving enlightenment under the tree. In Great Thunderclap Monastery, he only received Rulai's Mahayana Sutra's teachings and not the divine arts. However, the teachings were enough for him to start mulling over the divine arts. Rulai's Mahayana Sutra's divine arts were actually included in the 20 heavens of Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, with Thunderclap 8 Strikes being one of them. Thunderclap 8 Strikes was a divine art that belonged to Sakra realm, and was considered a top-notch divine art that was only inferior to Brahma divine arts. Bodhisohar divine arts belonged to Bodhivarksa Devata heaven. The 14th heaven counting from the top down and the 7th heaven counting from the bottom up. Even though Rulai's Mahayana Sutra was not Qin Mu's main in cultivation, he had not neglected his comprehension of it even if we didn't spend more time on it. What he was executing now was the true body of Body Jade Buddha, using Buddha nature to suppress the weird creature under the ground, preventing it from coming near. That strange creature was one moment there and the next over there, moving at an extremely fast speed. Furthermore, what's strange was that Qin Mu could feel that creature splitting and gathering from time to time. Sometimes it would tunnel into the tree and even the corpses. What exactly is that thing? At this moment, 2 breaths closed in from behind, and the carefree sword on Qin Mu's back came out of its sheath, transforming into wave sword form to swirl around his body. The 2 breaths went around, flying at him from 2 sides. It was the 2 white bats. They separated and came to the top of the 2 sculptures. They hung down from their nostrils, and one of the white bats chuckled. The foolish bull doesn't know that there's a large troop coming from behind. A few hundred experts have entered. Silence. The white bat on the nostrils of the other sculpture grumbled, "What are you warning him for?" "Large troop. Few hundred experts." Qin Mu was astonished. The ones coming in were definitely not the troops of Eternal Peace Empire. The military power of Chingmen Pass was okay, but they didn't have additional troops to deploy into Ghost Valley. It's the troops of Barbarian DI Empire. Qin Mu could no longer hesitate and immediately walked into the forest, rushing to the center of Ghost Valley. Clashing with the army of Barbarian DI Empire was definitely seeking death. That country's soldiers were wild and overbearing. The cooperation between the troops was very good, and they had the support of battle formations. When Qin Mu had followed Chancellor Ba Shan into Roland's Golden Palace, they had met the troops of the prairie and seen their extremely powerful abilities. 800 people could then fight against a cult master-level existence such as Ba Shan. Upon hearing the bat's words, Qin Mu could only avoid the several hundred experts from Barbarian DI Empire. The foolish bull is going to die. The two bats on the sculpture laughed in unison. Collapse, collapse. The Buddha rays lingering around Qin Mu's body protected him and the dragon Chilin, so he didn't collapse. The two white bats were bewildered, and one of them flew down from the nostrils of the sculpture. It grabbed onto a branch and hung in front of Qin Mu while asking in bewilderment, "Why are those things not attacking you?" Qin Mu raised his head. "Dao friend, what's under the ground?" The white bat was about to reply when it suddenly flew toward the nostril of the white bat god's sculpture without a word. Several hundred soldiers of Barbarian DI Empire, and dozens of brilliant gold great shamans, and shaman kings walked into the entrance of Ghost Valley. "Prince Pangong Tso, please." A shaman king bowed, and Pangong Tso slowly walked out from the back. With his gaze sharp as lightning, he swept through Ghost Valley and saw Qin Mu, who was sitting on the dragon Chilin's back. He couldn't help being stunned and revealing a smile. "I trust you have been well since we last met, Cult Master Qin." His voice was soft and immature, but it was loud and clear, exhibiting his incomparably dense cultivation. Qin Mu heard him, and his heart trembled slightly. His cultivation speed is even faster than mine. When we had clashed outside the capital city, even though he was on the same realm as me, his cultivation wasn't as dense as mine, but now he's already caught up. "I'm well." Qin Mu laughed and said, "I'm very well. Little Prince looks good as well. I was quite worried that those couple knives might have chopped you to death at that time. I'm now relieved to see that you're still alive." Pangong Tso smiled. Cult Master might have been well earlier, but not now. A shaman king raised his head and said after examining the bat god sculptures, "Prince, there are two bats up there." Pangong Tso said nonchalantly, "Kill them." Several hundred experts of Barbarian DI Empire didn't say a word, and just drew their spirit weapons. In an instant, several hundred gleaming knife pellets rose into the sky. Countless knife lights swept like waves toward the nostrils of the bat god sculptures in mid-air. The divine arts practitioners worked together to form a formation, drastically increasing the power by making their moves together. It was truly stunning. Back then, Chancellor Ba Shan had defended against 800 soldiers on the prairie by himself, and his divine art, Heavenly Spirit's escarpment, had been broken numerous times. However, that was because the troop had some experts of the prairie on Celestial Being Realm and Life and Death Realm. Even though the experts Pangong Tso had brought from the army were all divine arts practitioners, the ones with the strongest cultivation were still the four shaman kings that had cultivated to Celestial Being Realm and Life and Death Realm. These four shaman kings didn't make their moves, so even though the formation's power was immense, it couldn't be compared to what Chancellor Ba Shan had faced. The two white bats flew out in a hurry and opened their mouths. Circular sound waves came bombarding at the soldiers, the divine art they executed being one that used sound waves. However, what was weird was these sound waves couldn't be heard when they reached the ears. In the sky, countless curved knives were bombarded by the sound waves and came clanging down to the ground. The several hundred experts from the army below were struck by the silent sound waves and instantly turned into a complete mess. Suddenly, the heads of Barbarian DI Empire's soldiers grew bigger and bigger before exploding with a bang. The noise rang in the air without stopping, as the heads of the soldiers exploded one after another. The blood splattered in all directions, making the situation really shocking. The two white bats flew down from the sky and rushed toward the army with sound waves coming out from their mouths without stop. Suddenly, one of the shaman kings snorted and took out a white banner. He shook it at the two white bats, and they instantly felt their souls wavering. They fell from the sky and landed among the troops. The still-alive soldiers felt the pressure in their heads suddenly vanish and hurriedly controlled their knife pellets. Countless curved knives slashed toward the place where the two white bats had descended, and the clanging rang endlessly. After a wave of knife rain, everyone controlled their curved knives back into the knife pellets that were spinning in the sky rapidly. The place where the two white bats had landed had been carved into a huge pit by the countless curved knives. Even the rocks were sliced into fine powder. Two divine arts practitioners from Barbarian DI Empire went forward to check if the white bats were dead when dust suddenly filled the air from the pit. The two white bats flew out from the dust and flapped their wings, coming to the two divine arts practitioners in a flash. Their speed was so fast that no one could react, allowing them to grab the two soldiers before flying away. A shaman king saw this and jolted his shoulders. Golden rays shone brilliantly behind his back as they transformed into two golden wings. With a flap, he rose into the air and chased after the two white bats. While flying, that shaman king grew a bird's head and 6 arms. He wielded a Vajra scepter in his hand, which he smashed toward the two white bats with the rumbling of thunder. The speed of the bats who carried two divine arts practitioners was greatly decreased. The shaman was about to close in on them because of that, so the white bats could only throw their prey away. With an increase in speed after, they shook off their pursuer. The shaman king transformed his vital chi into a huge hand that caught the two divine arts practitioners. At that moment, he saw that these two people had already been sucked dry of their blood and died from unnatural causes. The two white bats landed on huge trees with their mouths open. Silent sound waves came from again, and turned their pursuers into a complete mess. One of the shaman kings raised a mirror and hung it in the sky. When the light from the mirror shone onto the body of one of the white bats, both of them fell from the trees. Whoosh! Knife lights came down like rain and slashed toward the place where the white bats had fallen. One of the shaman kings shook his body and transformed into a golden giant with an elephant's head. He raised a huge rock that was like a small mountain, and threw it where the two white bats had fallen. The primordial spirit of another shaman king showed its form behind him, and his vital chi transformed into a huge palm. With a mudra smashing down, the huge rock was smashed into smithereens, and the ground trembled endlessly as the trees in the surroundings got blown away. Now they should be dead, right? Everyone didn't even have to let out a sigh of relief. As the troops rushed over, the two white bats flew up again before they even got there. They flew into the forest in a drunken manner, but were not yet dead. A shaman king shook the white banner once again, and the souls of the two white bats were bombarded once again. They fell down, and the knife rain landed on them once more. When the wave of attack was over, the two white bats flew up again. Even though their bodies weren't stable, they were still not dead. Pretty impressive. Pan Gong Tso couldn't help being astonished. These two white bats had truly thick skin and flesh. Even the most famous knife pellets of the prairie couldn't injure them. The only ones dealing damage to them were the shaman kings of Roland's Golden Palace. The white bats withstanding the attacks of the shaman kings, and not dying right away, was actually out of his expectation. Qin Mu, who had already gone into the depths of the forest, smiled and asked to the dragon Chilin, "Fatty dragon, do you still think you are an opponent for these two white bats?" The dragon Chilin snorted. "They are very strong, but aren't they still getting the crap beaten out of them?" The soldiers of Barbarian DI Empire had already rushed into the forest of Ghost Valley to chase after their prey. The two white bats were heavily injured and were flying up and down in the forest from time to time. The divine arts practitioners of Barbarian DI Empire scattered and searched for them in all directions. At this moment, a rustle came from the forest, and a divine arts practitioner from Barbarian DI Empire executed his knife pellet in alert. It spun round and round, making fine curved blades fly out and revolve around itself. Some of those curved blades were big and some small. This video will end here.